Black Myth Wukong was my most anticipated game of the year, and many others feel the same way. This was a game that had a lot of hype around it, and typically what happens when a game reaches this level of hype is that it becomes impossible for the game to ever deliver on those expectations. Because people will immediately start going Insano style with unrealistic expectations. When this game drops, it's going to change the gaming industry forever. It's going to get my parents back together after the messy divorce, it's going to find me a wife, and it's going to make me 6 inches taller. Like, calm down, it's a video game, not a fairy godparent, you know what I mean? It just becomes very easy to get lost in the hype train that goes off the rails, so when the title actually does drop, it leads to people being disappointed or underwhelmed with it. However, in the case of Black Myth Wukong, I'm happy to say it actually exceeded my expectations. I've now dumped 30 hours into this puppy here, and I just want to give you my full review on it. Now, I actually haven't even gotten the true ending yet, because there's still a lot of things you have to do to get the secret true ending, which I'm going to go back through and do. But I wanted to give you a full review for now with my thoughts on it, and whether or not it's worth your money. First and foremost, I think all of you know Souls-like is my favorite genre. I get so giddy to play them. I get more excited for that than Randy Pitchford does at a squirting competition. And I thought Wukong was going to be a Souls-like title because all of the marketing material kind of gave off that vibe. However, it's not a Souls-like game. It's very clearly Souls-inspired, but it's more akin to something like God of War. Like recent God of War, 2018 and Ragnarok, with Souls elements woven into it. That's like the closest comparison I can make to the combat. But the combat is by far the best part about the game. I'm not disappointed that it's not more of a traditional Souls game. I actually really love the direction they went for the combat. It's not perfect, and I'm going to get into some of the complaints, but overall, it's extremely fun. Now, there is so much progression in this game. There's so many things you can be putting points into to change builds around and all of that. There's 3 stances: smash stance, pillar stance, thrust stance, and there's a lot of depth to what you can put points into. However, the combat itself is functionally going to stay the same no matter what build you're going with. All of your stances all use the same light attacks, for the most part. There is like a spear you can get that changes it around a little bit, but it still plays pretty much the same. What changes and where the variety comes from is through what stances you're using, so that changes your heavy attacks, which cost focus points, and they also introduce a couple of new moves you can do with them in these varied combos. But most of the combat's always going to be revolving around using light attacks to build up focus points, and then using heavy attacks for your actual fucking meat, where you're just feeding someone their vegetables. And that's an expression I'm using very generously, because every boss in this game has a crazy health pool, except for a few. So you're never exactly fucking anybody. You're not chunking anyone's health unless you have a highly min-maxed build for it. Most of the time, at best, you're feeding them like a single grain of corn. You're not giving anyone a heaping serving of vegetables with your damage, which is fine, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But what I want to talk about with the combat is there is a lot that you can be putting points into. So even outside of like the stances and the different things you can unlock there's a lot of static upgrades, there's a lot of magic upgrades where you can use these spells that really do play a huge role into the way that you can approach these fights. So you can do like a shadow clone jutsu for one if you want to put all your points into that, and you can try and have them be like your little minions that really help you chip away at bosses. You can immobilize them. There's a ring of fire that helps with buffs. There's the misstep, which lets you dodge and go invisible. There's transformations that have a bunch of different ones you can transform into from bosses that you've defeated. There is a lot to the progression system. And then even outside of just those core skills that you can be putting points into, there's gourd upgrades. There's medicine that you can be making. There's builds with the armor that you can be going for, with set bonuses. Like, there's just a lot of things and a lot of time you can spend crafting very interesting builds. I've seen quite a few people say that the combat in this game is shallow, and I have to imagine that's a huge self-report that they didn't get past Chapter 2. The game definitely does start with everything's just light attack, rinse and repeat until you have enough for a focus, and then you'll just drop like a charged heavy smash or a charged pillar stance smash, and that's it. But that's only in the beginning. As you continue to go, like, you're still getting new shit all the way till like the end of the game. So the combat continues to get deeper and deeper the more that you play and the more that you start to experiment. Yes, everything uses the same light attacks, but the way that you can approach combat is always going to be different from player to player. For example, towards the end of the game, I was finally able to complete my mythical lightning staff. And what this would do is it would help my pillar stance, and if I do a 3-focused heavy attack, it'll call down a fucking beam of lightning and do additional damage. So I built around that by introducing a spirit, which I don't even know if I mentioned spirits yet. You can also capture some spirits that'll give you bonuses, and you can use them briefly to do like an attack or a buff or something. And I used the Rat Governor spirit. God bless the Rat Governor, the finest politician in the game. He's bringing down the power of Zeus for you. So the Rat Governor comes out, he shoots lightning, and he improves my thunder damage. So it helped with my lightning staff build. So like there's just a lot of ways that you can do different things with the combat. Yes, the light attacks stay the same, but as you get deeper and deeper in the game and as you explore and unlock new things and experiment with new things, you can find a lot of fun ways of approaching the combat so it never feels like a slog. It never feels like you're not doing anything different. And especially because in this game, you can respec for free whenever you want. I love that feature. At any point in the game, you can just go to one of your shrines, which basically act as your bonfires for any Souls veterans out there, and you can just choose to reignite the sparks, which lets you reallocate all of your points completely for free. You can also do that for the relics, which give you other permanent bonuses. You can respec all of those for free. You can also do that for your medicines. Well, certain medicines that give you permanent buffs. You can redo all of those for free. So you can truly get fucking wacky with the ways that you build your character. And I really appreciate that. I didn't feel like the combat was shallow at all. The only problem I had with the combat is the camera. Well, actually, there's two. The camera would oftentimes be your biggest enemy. Like, that camera sometimes just has a grudge against you. It wants to give you a fucking wet willy whenever it can. You'll be in the middle of a boss fight and the camera just starts doing this like it's a fucking scene on a Cloverfield. And then your camera will like sometimes just go straight into the ground. I had that happen a handful of times. Or even worse, the camera will get stuck in the boss's butt cheeks because I guess some of the bosses just have gooch physics. So sometimes your camera will just get locked right on the boss's cheeks and you'll just be staring down the pipe of their poop shooter there like you're giving them a colonoscopy. And then you can't see what moves are coming at you and it makes it hard to dodge. That's usually reserved for big bosses, which there is a lot of in this game. So that was very frustrating when that happened. Finally just chipping away at a boss's endless health pool, bringing them to the brink, one pubic hair of health left, and then all of a sudden he kegels my camera. I can't see, he just hits me with the peekaboo and annihilates me. Definitely led to some moments of me just spitting, getting upset. And the other combat-related problem that I was having was some janky hitboxes. There are some bosses in this game, and they're the worst bosses in this game, where you're just hitting at toes. So you have like these skinny chicken-legged bosses, and you can't like hit their body, you have to hit their legs to drop them. And because of these tiny little noodle legs and these itsy-bitsy tootsies, you'll be swinging your light attacks at them, and sometimes it's just not hitting at all. All of your light attacks are missing, so you're not building up focus. When you do get lucky and start hitting them occasionally to build up focus, and you do your, heavy attack like you're doing smash stance, you'll sometimes just completely fucking whiff because it's so skinny, the hitbox is so tight, and there's a little bit of wonkiness to it that you just won't be doing any damage, which obviously doesn't feel good. And there's some bosses that have moves where the hitbox doesn't actually match the visuals. So this was actually a problem with the Yellow Wind Sage, which I know a lot of players were banging their head against the wall against. That's like the first actually challenging boss in the game. And what happens is there's a couple moves where the Wind Sage will throw out a long-ranged attack, and you're seeing it coming the whole way, and you'll dodge it, but the hitbox actually is a little ahead of the projectile. So when you're ready to dodge it and you go for it, you'll sometimes just get hit because you can't time it right because the hitbox is actually ahead of it. And the Yellow Wind Sage also has a really frustrating design where some of the challenge with the boss is that he goes outside of a sand tornado and just starts spamming moves that you can't see coming. And every boss in the game always can skate across the whole arena to hit you with an attack chain. So if he's starting those attacks outside the tornado, you can't really see when it's coming, and you just have to be like split-second reaction to. Which, for your boy, wasn't a huge problem. I got him in 4 tries, but for a couple of friends of mine, they weren't so lucky. Maybe skill issue, maybe not, but the hitboxes are definitely wonky with some bosses. Another notable example is the 100-eyed Taoist. That's towards the end of the game. Well, over halfway through the game, there's a boss that is giant spider body, giant like fucking centaur guy. It looks like something out of the Harry Potter Cursed Forest or whatever that had all those unicorns and shit. And this dude comes out, and you want to get to like the side of him. Oh, it's a centipede body, not a spider body. Excuse me, I didn't mean to offend any spiders out there. But you want to get to like the side of his body so you can start wailing on his legs and not get punished up front. But you can't really run around the side of him because his hitbox is so fucking robust. Like the girth is so crazy that you can't actually run around the side in time because he's tracking you and you can't get around that hitbox fast enough. Sometimes you get lucky and squeeze through it when he throws out an attack, but if you want to actually try and like get behind him, you can't do that super well because the hitbox extends too far. So hitboxes were definitely a problem throughout the game with some of the bosses, but it was never like egregious. Like it was never to the point where I thought it was unfair or broken. It's just one of those things that when it happened, it made me mad in the moment, but it's not something that you can't overcome and learn to deal with the jankiness of. But yes, it isn't perfect. It's not like flawless. So I think combat is the best part about this game. If you're someone that likes high action, nuts to butts, high octane action, this is the game for you. It's a must play for that alone. And I think this game does something very smart, where instead of giving you like a ton of trash mobs to fight through to get to the next boss, where it kind of almost feels like filler, where you're just fighting a bunch of like scraps, you know, this game gives you tons of bosses, oodles. This probably has the most bosses out of any game I've played in recent memory. I can't think of any game that has this many bosses. And there's so many secret bosses too. And I need to give fucking huge praise for like the secret content they have here. I'm gonna glaze the shit out of it for that. I did tons of exploring. I explored every nook and cranny I could find for this game, turned over every goddamn rock looking if there's any gold underneath it, just all kinds of beautiful little nuggets of lore and treasure throughout these worlds. And they have entire zones that are entirely optional that are huge. Like Chapter 2, for example. There's a quest line you can start with a big pig guy that's slapping at his belly. And if you start his quest line, it unlocks a big area and a lot of stuff to it and a lot of boss fights. Like there's so much depth that you can find through exploring the game. It's amazing. Like I don't know how people are calling this like too linear or not big. This has so much to it. It's very clear you're just not actually exploring it. You are just beelining and saying that. There's so many side bosses, so many side quests that lead to huge areas with massive bosses. It was so refreshing to do these side quests, get this nice reward with either material, weapons, armor, something like that, and fight a fucking awesome boss that had like a really good storyline for the side quest too. Like it was great. So I think that is exceptionally well done here. But what I was trying to say is these are huge zones for the most part, and there is like a lot of like smaller enemies throughout them, and there's some enemies that you can kill and get the spirit of to use on your side if you want to, and that's cool. But it's not just running through a bunch of trash mobs to get to the next boss. There's some trash mobs, yeah, but you can like explore off the beaten path and immediately just find a boss. There are so many in this game. The only other game that I think has this amount of boss fights is probably Elden Ring, and that's great company to be in. Now, I don't think Black Myth Wukong is nearly to the level of Elden Ring or anything, but I do think it's a very good game. Now, like I said, there's a ton of bosses here, and that's the best part of these kind of games, is fighting well-designed, great-looking, badass bosses, and this gives you that in droves. You know, like, you're more likely to find a boss in one of these zones than you are to find, like, a normal enemy. It's so nice, actually. I love that. So now, since we're talking about bosses, I want to give the good and the bad and the super stinky when it comes to some of these boss fights. The good. The bosses are really fucking cool. I love the visuals in this game. I think the design is incredible. Obviously, the game is graphically beautiful. It is a stunning looking game, and the bosses are such a treat to look at. And it feels really rewarding when you just happen to find one or you finish a side quest line for one and get rewarded with a really cinematic, there's some really cool cinematics. In fact, I think my favorite one is actually for a side boss, the Dusk Veil. And that's a totally optional one. Point is, the bosses look amazing. The movesets for most of them overall are really cool and feel fair. But there are a couple of bosses in this game that have actual bullshit in their arsenal. So the game overall, I think, is not nearly as challenging as most of the other games in a Souls-like genre, or I don't even think it's as challenging as some of the bosses in God of War 2018 or Ragnarok. I think overall, most players will find this game pretty simple and easy to get through the majority of it, but there are a few bosses throughout that are actually a slog. There's a couple bosses that are just, for lack of a better term, pardon my French, poop. I've already mentioned the Yellow Wind Sage, where a lot of people hate that boss because of obscuring your vision of the moveset, but I actually think the stupidest design for the boss is the 100-Eyed Taoist in his second phase. In his second phase, the challenge comes from him reducing your overall stamina by half. I actually think it's more than half. He gives you just enough stamina to roll like twice before getting winded. You start huffing and puffing like me going up 2 flights of stairs. And that's just not fun. That's a really cheap design for a challenge, where the challenge just comes from, oh, he took away like all of my stamina, so I can't fight back that well. And the counterplay to it is by using an item. I don't want to spoil how you beat that boss, but there is like a counterplay to it. But if you don't have that item, if you didn't go out of your way to find and get that item, it becomes an unbelievably obnoxious chore to beat him with like 2 rolls worth of stamina, because then you get maybe like 1 light attack string off and then won't be able to dodge, so then you're just a sitting duck for him to put his cock in. Like, it's not a fun challenge from that design perspective. And I already mentioned some of the bosses that are really tall and you're wailing at their feet. There's never anything fun about that. I've always hated that from a design perspective. Like, sometimes it works. Like, there are a couple bosses like that I think are cool. But for the most part in this game, there's just never anything fun about trying to, like, hit a very small leg enough that they'll fall down so then you can hit them in their body. I just never really like that. But overall, I do think the vast majority, 98% of all boss fights in this game are really fun and feel really good to fight against. Now, I did mention that for the most part the game is on the easier side of a game in this genre, but I wanted to take a quick second here to pay some respect to some of the hardest bosses in this game. Yin Tiger, which is an optional fight where you can challenge a blacksmith that you unlock through a side quest to a challenge where you will fight him for his spirit. And he has, I think, like 3 or 4 different attack chains, all of which have like 10 or 11 moves in them. So you have to dodge or use spells. Well, actually, you can't even use spells most of the time because he has an ability to break out of your immobilize. So if you cast Immobilize, he's just going to teleport out of it instantly, so you won't even get any value out of that. If you try and hide from him using Pillar Stance, he'll instantly counter you with a command grab. That's something I also want to mention. He's not the only one that does this kind of shit. There are bosses in this game where they counter some of what you're doing. It's like they learned from you. So there's another boss, an Inspector, where if you do a Pillar Stance where you try and like wait out or bait out some ground attacks, because Pillar Stance puts you high enough that you'll dodge them, what he'll do instead is he will stop throwing out ground attacks and he'll just do range projectiles so he can hit you off Pillar Stance, which is really cool, especially like thematically. It's very cool that the bosses are observing you and learning you. So if you're trying to dodge Yin Tiger on your Pillar Stance, he's going to cast Command Grab and you're going to get one shot for it, which is very cool, and it makes him a very hard boss. And his 10 or 11 attack chains, which he does like 3 of those, he has like 3 different variations of it, are punishing. Like, it took me a long time to beat him. But the boss that actually took me a longer time to beat is Yellow Long. Yellow Long is this dragon guy who has a lightning spear. And in this game, this is universal across all the bosses, when a boss starts using attacks, if you run away from it, you're not safe, Buster. Yeah, just when you thought you were out, they pulled you back in. It's a ruse. They'll do like 4 attacks away from you, and their 5th attack goes across the entire fucking arena, like they just instant transmissioned on you like Goku. Like they go across the entire arena like a goddamn hockey puck, and then hit you with their next 4 attacks, and you thought you were safe by being a mile away. You weren't, bub. It's actually crazy how every boss can do that, but Yellow Long does it best. Because of his spear, everything is sweeping, and everything has a lingering hitbox because of the lightning. So when you're dodging all of his attacks, if you don't double dodge some of them, you still get hit by the ass end of the hitbox. It was super fucking challenging. I switched builds, I think, 4 times to beat him, and it took me like an hour and a half or an hour 40. That is the boss I had spent the longest time on. Now, in other Souls games, I've definitely spent longer on, like for example, Elden Ring DLC, I spent 3 hours on the final boss there. So it's not to that level of challenge or anything, but there definitely are some bosses that will take you quite a few attempts, and you'll probably have to switch builds a few times throughout, which, you know, for some people might be frustrating, but for me, I didn't mind. Those 2 bosses, the ones I just mentioned, didn't feel like bullshit. Yes, they made me mad, they had me baby raging and whatever, but at the end of the day, there wasn't anything in their moveset that I thought was terribly designed or anything. The only one that I could point to that I thought was a little wonky was for Yellow Long. He has 4 sweeping attacks, and that leaves behind an invisible hitbox sometimes. So that kind of made me mad because it felt like, how was I supposed to know that I'd get hit even after I dodged it because he had like some residue that he crop dusted me with. But yeah, I wanted to mention that real quick. There is one thing though, another thing, that I think a lot of people are going to hate when it comes to fighting some of these bosses: the health pool. That was a complaint of mine for some bosses. Some bosses have more health than others, and the ones that do, like Yellow Long, holy shit, they have a lot of health. Yellow Long was clapping me. Like, you couldn't pull his dick from my butt with the jaws of life. His cock was buried so far up my asshole, it was like Excalibur in the stone. You couldn't pull it from the stone. And a lot of the reason for that was because his health pool was so large. So even after you get like far into the game, the bosses don't feel like you're doing more damage to them. It doesn't feel like you're getting stronger in terms of how hard you're hitting, even though you're upgrading your weapons, you're upgrading your armor, you're adding more points to, you know, flat damage buffs. The boss's health is scaling too. Well, I don't know if it's necessarily scaling or if it just starts super huge, but like, you don't do a ton of damage even as you go further and get stronger. So Yellow Long, like, I think when I finally beat him, it was a 9-minute boss fight-ish, something like that. It was 9 minutes, start to finish, of me just punishing him. Like, going as hard as I can on DPS, casting Immobilize off rip, doing Pluck of Many, which is my Shadow Clone Jutsu, transforming into my strongest transform to stack on even more damage, rock soliding all of his moves, which is basically the parry system in this game. It's a spell. You cast rock solid, parry, gives you focus, I'll hit him with a charged heavy. Doing all of that, and still just barely whittling away at his health over the course of like 9 minutes to beat him. So some bosses, I really do think, just have overtuned amount of health. It's not like the moves I have an issue with, it's mainly just some bosses' health is crazy. Now, let's go ahead and move on from combat-related things. I know I've spent a long time on this, on that subject, but that is the main selling point for this game. Most people are going to be interested in Black Myth Wukong because of how fun the combat looks. And let me just assure you, the combat is even more fun to play than it is to watch. I really enjoyed it. I loved how there were just so many boss fights. They were so different from one another for the most part, and it really just felt good. And I spent a lot of time crafting a lot of different builds. Some worked, some didn't, some fumbled, some fucked. It is what it is. It was still a very, very fun experience. I want to get to the story now, because this actually surprised me. The game is obviously based around Journey to the West, and it has some of the most hype cutscenes of the whole year. I love the intro to this game, and I loved the conclusion to this game, and I got the bad ending. I got like the weakest ending, and I still loved how it ended. And the game also does these end of chapter cutscenes, which are fully animated pieces that go for like 5 minutes sometimes. Like these 5 minutes might be exaggeratory. I'm not sure how long they go, but they feel like a long time because you get a lot of content. After each chapter, you get a beautiful animation. And it's not always just like the same style either. There's like a stop motion animation in here too. I loved it. It tells a really interesting story. Now, I'm loosely familiar with Journey to the West, like the actual story of it, but there were so many things in here I had no clue on. And there were sometimes I got lost because the story is kind of pieced together in a interesting way that I wasn't expecting, so I kind of did get lost when it came to the lore occasionally, but I was still so invested in the world and the characters and the narrative. It was so fucking good. Like, that shocked me how much I liked the story of the game. And there's so many cutscenes too. There's so much more storytelling in this game than I thought there would be. I thought it would be all combat all the time. It's not. There is a lot of world building and a lot of storytelling, and it is done so well. At least I think it is. I do think I was done a disservice by just playing the English dub, because I don't think all of it had been translated properly. Like, there's so many times a character will just, for some reason, call someone else a rascal or a knucklehead or something, so that's a little cringe with some of the dialogue, but the overall story is really compelling. Like, it's very interesting. I was definitely invested in the narrative. Oh, and I have to mention the music. The music in this game is so good, especially during some of the animated sequences. Fuck me, it was beautiful. There are so many good pieces in this game. I will probably end up downloading the soundtrack. And I don't do that for a lot of games. I do that for some games. My favorite is still Nier. I still think the original Nier has the most beautiful soundtrack ever made. But this game has an incredible score. I want to call attention to that and give some flowers there. They did a great job with the music here. Overall, I just had an incredible time with this game and plan on continuing to play it to get the secret ending. There is one other complaint that I'll go ahead and get out there, and it's both a praise and a complaint. I think overall the levels are really, really cool. I do think most of the levels in this game are super cool. However, there are two instances that I do think they made a misstep. Chapter 6, which is the final chapter, you get the Nimbus Cloud. Awesome. Super hype. However, there's no direction at all. It's a giant open area now, whereas everything else is not really an open area per se. This is. It's just a giant open area, and there's like some big bosses, but there's like a lot of little enemies too. So unless you watch a guide, which I admittedly did, you won't really know what you're supposed to do. There is no direction. There's nothing to point you with a mission. You just have to fucking feel your way around. And that's not exactly fun, especially because it takes a long time to traverse through this huge open area. And there's not a lot to do besides do the right thing in it. So I do think that was a misstep. And I also think Chapter 3 is just way too long compared to everything else. Chapter 3 is significantly longer than every other chapter in this game. It's very good, like it's super good, but I don't know why it's so much longer than all the others. And I just wanted to call attention to those two things. Overall though, like I said, I think the levels in the chapters are really good, but there's definitely some room for improvement there. I think this game is extraordinary, but I do think it has plenty of flaws. I am very pleased with the time I've spent with it, and I definitely think it's worth buying. 100% I think it's worth buying. If you like Souls games, you'll definitely like this one, even though it's not exactly a Souls game. There's Souls elements in there that I'm sure you'll appreciate. If you like very high action games, you're going to love it. Like, I do think this is just a game that a lot of people are going to really, really like. I think it's worth the money. If I was to plug it into the Moist meter, I'd give it a very cool 85%. Like, I really think it's a great game, and yeah. I'm sure many of you are probably exhausted from me going gushing grannies over the first Space Marine game, which I just played for the first time like 5 days ago, and now this one. It's just so good, and I love the universe. Like, I knew nothing about this going into it. I was basically a Warhammer Cro-Magnon, and now, after completing the game and seeing the credits roll, I would let the Emperor suck from my fucking tits. Like, I have become hooked. I've already watched some lore breakdown videos, and I might even get me some of those miniatures. So if you see me begging on the streets with a bunch of scratch marks on my neck, you know what happened to me. But yeah, I think Space Marine 2 is incredible. It is my second favorite game of the year, just behind Black Myth Wukong. I don't know what crack everyone's smoking to say that it's mid, or I saw some like 6 out of 10s for it. They must have been playing a completely different game. This is as old school as gaming gets. I said this during streams. It feels like an Xbox 360 game in the golden era. Like, I mean that as the highest compliment. It's got a great story. It's visually beautiful. The gameplay is super fun, and I never got bored of it from start to finish. Hordes of enemies. The cutscenes are immaculate. Like, the final cutscene in particular, I was filled with so much testosterone, I almost fucked my own ass. It is so good. Like, everything about the game, I really enjoy, including even its PvP multiplayer. Like, yeah, it's not the most fleshed out multiplayer ever, but I actually really like that. It's super simple. You play as some Ultramarines, and you go out there and clap some cheeks in either Domination or TDM. It's really fun. But anyway, let's start with the campaign. So it's not very long, and this is a critique I've seen quite a few people say, that there's not a ton of content in it, and I can understand that to a certain degree. The campaign took me a little over 7 hours, just barely over 7 hours. I played on Veteran, which is the second highest. There is another difficulty, but I think that's probably best reserved for playing with some buddies, because even on Veteran there was a challenge there, and I imagine this will be punishing on the highest difficulty. And I also imagine this game is extremely good co-op. I played through on solo, but I think this would be a really fun co-op game. But I personally don't think that the campaign is too short or anything. I've said this before, I'd prefer like a really well-paced, tight 7 hours as opposed to a slog 40-hour experience. By the time I finish that game, like, my beard is graying. Like, I hate that. Where it's just tedious for the sake of tedium, and it's a bunch of chores that you start losing interest in. You just can't wait to be done with it, and then it becomes like a sunk cost fallacy, like, well, I've already come this far, might as well finish it. With Space Marine 2, I was always excited. Like, it just kept going hard. Like, it was going hog wild, ballistic start to finish, so I didn't mind that it was only like 7 hours. And there is more content to do after you finish the campaign. There are operations that they don't feel like they're just some throwaway shit. Like, the operations feel really important because they're actually weaved into the main story. So while you're playing through the campaign, you'll be getting updates from the operations that are running congruent to that narrative. And when you're playing it, you're contributing directly to the main story, which is really nice. And I think the story is really, really good. Again, I knew nothing about Warhammer 40k coming into this. I did play the first game, but I think you could play this without playing the first one. It does a good job of bringing you up to speed with what happened and why Titus, the character you play as, is kind of under suspicion. He's built a little bit different than the other Ultramarines. It's also just so beautiful. Like I said, visually, I think this game has some of the best art direction of the year. It is stunning. Absolutely stunning. The game throws hordes of Tyranids at you. Your mission starts with, you gotta take care of the Tyranid threat here. Shit's going cattywampus, and you gotta solve the problem. You and your 2 Ultramarines that you lead. And you go out there, and you dispense some justice for the glory of the Emperor. Is there any higher honor? And I don't want to get into spoilers, but it becomes more than just killing the Tyranids. It becomes something much bigger than that. And it's just fun. So this has this horde system where during a lot of encounters, this is a very frequent thing. It's kind of the bread and butter of the gameplay loop. There's going to be hordes of Tyranids, or down the line, some Chaos agents, and they just send tons of enemies at you, and it's your job to swat them like mosquitoes. So kind of like in World War Z, if any of you played that game. I didn't really like that game, but I think they absolutely crushed this system in this game. They'll have like the Tyranids crawling over each other and making like a wall of meat to climb up to your position, and you need to like manage that wall, otherwise you might get overrun by just this swarm of insects that you might not be able to handle. Then there's, of course, like some elite enemies mixed in with them, some bigger enemies, some buff enemies, and it just becomes very hectic, but in a good way. Like, it never feels unfair or stupid or overwhelming. It just feels hype at all times. It just feels extremely hype, especially because the cutscenes complement that and just continue to just put their foot on the gas. I just actually can't picture someone sitting through this game with a frown on their face going, meh, trash, garbage. Like, I really can't envision that. Because this is, like, the essence of a game. Like, it doesn't try and do anything, like, super crazy. It's just happy and content being a really fun, over-the-top action game. Now, I do understand why people might be frowning about the actual combat, because it's pretty simple. It doesn't deliver anything that you haven't already seen a million times before. Also, the enemy variety is kind of lacking. You end up fighting the same enemies over and over again, which didn't really bother me because it's just fun to kill them. And the combat, to me, was fun. I appreciated the simplicity of it. So you have 2 weapons, and then you have an ability, you have grenades, and you have melee. That's it. There's not a ton of weapons to choose from. There is quite a bit of variety, but a lot of them play pretty identical to one another. And the melee is basically the exact same combos for everything. So you have light attacks, and you can hold for a heavy attack. And it's not the most fleshed out melee combat, but I think it's effective. You can parry enemies, you can dodge, and there's perfect dodges, which you can then punish with like this, headshot. It'll be like this aimbot headshot if you do a parry or a perfect dodge. And it's nice, you regain your shield. There's also finishers, so if you weaken them enough, you can execute them to get shield. It's fun, but it's not deep. So I do think people are going to be a little put off by that. It's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. But for me, I really enjoyed it. Oh, also, there's like a lot of customization as well, so you can really put your best foot forward here to dress to impress for the Emperor, make him clap for you, and kick his little feet in his chair with a smile on his face while spitting up. There's just so much to love about this game, but it's not perfect by any means. There is some real jankiness to it, but it's nothing that I think ruins the experience. I do think that many people are going to find it severely lacking in content compared to a lot of games that have come out recently. It doesn't bother me because I don't feel that way. I definitely feel like I got my money's worth with just the campaign, let alone the operations that are actually really fun and the PvP. Now, there isn't many operations. There's only 6 operations right now, but they're apparently adding more down the line, so it's not like it's going to be 6 operations forever. But even still, like, to me, I got plenty of content out of the purchase, so I'm very pleased with it, but I do think for a lot of people they're going to find it a little lacking in that department, and I don't think they're wrong for feeling that way. But overall, I definitely think Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 is worth picking up. It's the first time in a long time that I really feel like I was playing a passion project from the developers. It didn't feel like it was some, like, corporate decision where everything was dictated by, like, numbers, like how can we get the most juice for the squeeze from our players and fuck them, and maybe we make it open world or something, like, oh, maybe it needs to be some type of turbo live action experience. Though I do think this game is like pseudo live action. I don't think it's labeled as a live service. I don't think it's labeled as a live service game, but they have like a whole roadmap for what they're going to be doing with like operations and more PvE content. So I guess you could kind of classify it as like a pseudo live service game, but it just doesn't feel like all of the live service games we've been fed recently, like the dog shit that's been put on our plate from those genres. This one actually just feels like some developers love the property and wanted to make a fun, cool game set in that universe. Even something as simple as PvP multiplayer honestly just feels straight out of like 2010. Like back when I was playing Gears of War every single day. I know a lot of people compare this to the Gears of War. Like there are some similarities for sure, but it plays very differently than Gears of War. Like there's no like cover shooting elements to it or anything. But like it reminds me of how Gears of War's multiplayer was, from what I recall, somewhat of an afterthought. They just threw it on there and it became an absolute smashing success. I'm not saying the PvP in this feels like an afterthought or anything, but it feels like it has that same DNA where it's, we want to offer this because some people might really enjoy it. They're not making the PvP to try and have it become the next big esport to compete with Call of Duty or anything. It's just there because, hey, some people might have fun just hopping in for maybe like an hour every now and then, just playing whatever class they really like. Maybe you enjoy jetpacking and slamming down the hammer, just clobbering with a big AoE thunder hammer, and you want to just ruin a couple people's night by spamming that and having some fun. It's just a game that I really enjoy a lot. Again, it's not without its flaws, but none of the flaws of this game take away even a single fucking moment of the enjoyment I've had with it. So yeah, I do recommend it. I think it's fun. That's really about it. So yeah. Astro Bot is a phenomenon right now. It's a game that's getting perfect scores from pretty much every single publication out there. I'd probably struggle to find anything below a 9 for Astro Bot right now. It's mainly 10s, and it's not just from game journalists. Almost every single person I know that's played Astro Bot is singing its praises about how this should 100% be the game of the year, and it's not close. So I just finished it, and the question must be asked, why can't I grow facial hair in these two areas on my face? It's infuriating, which then raises an additional question, does Astro Bot live up to the hype? Is it actually this perfect masterpiece that so many people are claiming that it is? Because Astro Bot is getting more glazed than my trousers when I think about good boobies. Is it really that amazing? Yes. From the very first trailer, I was sold on this game. It just looks like a classic platforming experience that's simple, fun, creative, colorful, and just a joy. Charming. And I'm happy to say that it matched my expectations and it lives up to all of the hype. It really is just pure fun. Now, one of the biggest criticisms I see for this game from people that want to throw cold water on the face of anyone enjoying it is that it's a glorified ad. Yeah, no shit, but it's still like a really fun game. It is just a PlayStation advertisement. It's basically taking a walk down the memory lane here, where you basically glup shitto like a Star Wars fan, pointing at the screen like, oh, I get that reference. Oh, I know that cameo. Because in Astro Bot, what you're doing is you're rebuilding a PlayStation 5 after it gets fucking robbed by one of the aliens from the Jimmy Neutron movie. And then you're putting all the pieces back together, and to do that, you need to defeat some enemies, defeat some bosses, and along the way, you're saving some bots. And some of those bots are cameos from beloved PlayStation classics like Ape Escape, like Jak and Daxter. And it's really refreshing to remember how great some of these IPs that Sony does nothing with were, and still are. A lot of these games really still hold up in the modern age. And then there's skins from other games like Bloodborne. Dankin said during my stream that Astro Bot has done more for Bloodborne than Sony has in the last 10 years. And he's 100% right. Sony just lets that fester and die in their fucking putrid butthole, along with many other IP that Sony just trap in the dungeon, fucking lock away in a sarcophagus, and then call the wambulance wondering where'd all our great IP go. It's refreshing to see life with these properties in Astro Bot. There's games that I grew up on represented in here, and it's really just nice. It's a feel-good experience. The levels are creative. You pick up some power-ups that'll give you more options besides just the normal punch and jump. So you'll get like little frog clampers where you'll be like fucking shooting little frog faces out there to blow things up and attack enemies. You'll get a time-stopping watch to help with solving puzzles. There's secret levels, there's challenge levels, and there's a lot of fun boss fights. It is a simple, enjoyable game. It's not a very long game. I didn't 100% it or anything, but it took me about 7 hours and some change to just finish it. And I did get a lot of it done, but there's still a lot more that I have to do. There's a lot of secret levels I missed. I didn't do every challenge level. I didn't find every puzzle piece. And from what I've read, to platinum trophy this game, it's like 10 to 12 hours. So to 100% it, you'll be putting in a little over 10 hours. And I think that's not like a short experience when it's one that is so memorable and one that's probably going to have you smiling from start to finish. I really don't have a single complaint for this game. I couldn't even fucking nitpick something if I wanted to. There is really nothing that this game does poorly. Everything it does extremely well. It controls great. It's visually wonderful. There's really fucking crazy physics to this as well that you'll also use to be solving puzzles. There's so much creativity. It oozes style. Every level is distinct and unique. I actually just can't think of anything that I could try and say as a negative about the game. Like, the only one you might be able to say is that it's too short for some people's taste, but for me, I think it's perfect length. Now, while I do think this is going to be a very strong Game of the Year contender, I don't think it's like a guaranteed slam dunk landslide victory for Astro Bot. It's been a really good year for games. It's not my favorite game of the year. It's in my top 3, but my favorite game of the year is still Black Myth Wukong. My second favorite game is Space Marine 2, and then just barely behind Space Marine 2 is Astro Bot. Those two are fucking shitting and spitting for that number 2 spot. And maybe when I go back and 100% Astro Bot, that ranking will move from 3 to 2. But I don't think it's going to beat Black Myth Wukong in my eyes. It's a very good year for games, and I do see a world where Astro Bot wins Game of the Year. This is a game that I think appeals to pretty much anyone of any taste. You'd have to be pretty joyless to find things to hate about Astro Bot. I do think there are people that might not appreciate it all that much, especially if there's someone whose tastes are more in line with something that's deeper or more narrative heavy or more action oriented. Like, maybe there's just not a whole lot of things that you like about puzzle solving, and Astro Bot might not be for you. If you don't like platforming, Astro Bot might not be for you. But it is objectively good in all of the departments that Astro Bot inhabits. It is very good with puzzles. It's very good with platforming. Now, while it's not a challenging game, I don't think it needs to be, because it's still just a really fun game. And there is a challenge to it, like there are challenge realms which do present you with difficult shit, but overall it is an easy game, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Also, I need to mention this, the music in Astro Bot is extraordinary. Especially in the boss levels, this has boner jams out the wazoo. I was blown away by how good the music was in here. Like, I was bouncing up and down in my seat for some of these tracks. I really do think Astro Bot is just a game that pretty much anyone can pick up a controller and really, really have a great time with. Even if you're someone who didn't, grow up on PlayStation property, you don't even know what the fuck Ape Escape is, so the whole Ape Escape planet, means nothing to you, you'll probably still really like it because it's just a really well-made game. So, I do think Astro Bot is 100% worth buying. But I don't think you should go out and buy a PlayStation 5 just to play it. And please, Lord help us, don't buy the PlayStation 5 Pro for 700 clams just to play Astro Bot. Don't buy that at all, by the way. I already made a video ranting about the absurdity of the PS5 Pro pricing. No disk drive, no stand, and $700 for a moderate upgrade to the existing PlayStation 5. But anyway, the point I'm making is I don't think it's a system seller type of game where it's so amazing that you need to go out right now and find a PlayStation 5 before it's too late. You need to experience Astro Bot right now. This is a game where if you have a PlayStation 5, this is a must-own title. But I don't think you need to go spend a ton of money to get the PlayStation 5 just to play Astro Bot. It is a game that you will have a great 10 to 12 hours with, and you might replay it every now and then just because it's really enjoyable to play. But I don't think it's a game you're going to be pumping 30, 40, 50 hours into, you know what I mean? But I think it is extraordinary. I think it absolutely lives up to the hype, and I definitely think it is a game that is 100% worth buying. That's about it. See ya. With every trailer that dropped for Silent Hill 2 Remake, I lost more and more confidence in this game having any chance at being good. Most people were already counting Bloober Team out. They had less faith in Bloober Team than they do in Ubisoft making a good open world title. But against all the odds, like an anime protagonist, they didn't give up, and they actually delivered a good game. Much to my surprise and the surprise of many others who played it, it's actually kind of a banger. It kind of slaps. As Darman has always taught us, you can't judge a book by its cover. I do think the game is worth buying if you're a fan of games in this genre. I don't think this is going to be for everyone. It's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, and I think the main reason for that is the combat's okay, but it's not great. It's serviceable, but it's not like that was my favorite part of playing this, and it's not the focal point of Silent Hill 2. If you've played the original, you'll know that the combat in that game was basically non-existent. You could just run by every enemy, just fucking plug your ears, close your eyes, and just sprint past them. There wasn't much of a threat to the enemies. It has been significantly improved in the remake. Now the enemies are actually threatening. They take a lot of hits. You can't run by them as easily, and there's a lot more of them. But I just don't think the combat is all that satisfying. It works, for sure, but if you're someone who prefers action-oriented games, or if you're used to something like Resident Evil 2 Remake or Resident Evil 4 Remake, where the combat and the gameplay was a lot tighter and felt a lot more fun, you might be disappointed here. But the beauty of Silent Hill 2 is in its world and its story. It's so good. It was never going to be a hog wild, titties out, fucking guns blazing, action-oriented game. It has always been about its story. That is the bread and butter of Silent Hill. It's a great narrative, great characters, and a super eerie world that it presents you with. So if you're someone that can get immersed in a game, I definitely think this is a must play. It's been many, many moons since I played the original Silent Hill 2, and for its time, that game broke new ground for the genre. That story was something that had people talking about it for years, and even to this day, people still talk about how good that story was, and how not many things even match the vibe that Silent Hill 2 got across. And I've seen some people criticize this game during streams, saying that it doesn't capture that vibe. I disagree. I actually think the remake does a really good job of getting super close to that really uncanny, eerie feeling that the original presented, while still maintaining, good voice acting performances. If you go back and listen to the voice acting in the original Silent Hill 2, there are moments that sound like House of the Dead. Friends, you've come. Oh my God. Maria, why would you do this? But during the time, that actually contributed to that really weird, creepy feel of Silent Hill. This game has moments like that, but it does feel more emotional, in my opinion. Again, it's been many years since I actually played Silent Hill 2, but I just do feel like Silent Hill 2 Remake did a really good job of capturing that similar vibe and that similar magic. The game looks amazing, the visuals, the presentation are top-notch, and the music, boner jams out the wazoo, but the sound design, the actual audio in this game, is extremely impressive. I play everything with one earbud. You all know that. So I'm not even getting the full experience, but even I, fucking nerfed here for sound, still had moments where I'd hear things in the game that were, unsettling, and I wasn't sure if it was, in real life, or if I had just heard one of those fucking giant feet monsters tucking itself away in a corner or something. It was really cool how well this game used audio in its delivery of this atmosphere. I do want to talk about the gameplay one more time, though. I really appreciate that they made the enemies more of an actual obstacle in this game as opposed to fucking Weenie Hut Jr. in the original. I just wish the gameplay, fighting them, was a bit more elevated, because it became such a tedious chore towards, the second half of the game, just fighting the same 4 enemies over and over and over again. There's only 4 enemy types in this game, excluding bosses, and you always just fight them the same way. You can either shoot them twice in the kneecap and then hit them with the pipe, or you can just hit them with the pipe 3 times, dodge their follow-up, pipe them 3 more times, maybe give them a couple back shots, and you're done. That's how you just keep rinse and repeating enemies, and it just doesn't change. It was enjoyable in the beginning because it felt fresh, because in the original, you didn't really have to do that. But it just never evolves, just constantly banging your head against the wall, fighting the same enemies over and over again, like they're casting a shadow clone jutsu, so you end up fighting 3 nurses in a hallway, and you just keep dodging left and right, and then sometimes you have to dodge some puke. It's, I don't know. The combat, I just wish had a little bit more put into it. I know it's not the focus of the game or anything, but since they put so many more enemies in there and beefed them up, I wish they had beefed up the combat as well. Now, of course, with everything in this game, the presentation is extraordinary, so the 4 enemies that you encounter so often are really cool looking. They are beautiful creature designs. The monsters still look great. I think they look better here than they did in the original. I do think they crushed it there. I do also think that the boss fights are much better here. I remember the boss fights not being very enjoyable in the original. Here, they're hype. Getting chased by Pyramid Head who's trying to take your lunch money, then actually having a good boss encounter attached with it, that felt great. It's just the actual just fighting of normal enemies just really lost its luster. I wish there was just more to it. You get two new weapons throughout the course of the game, so you have a couple weapon options, but it doesn't really change the way you approach anything. Just helps with damage a little bit. So it's very serviceable. Like, it's not bad. I want to make that clear. I don't think the gameplay is bad by any means. I just would have liked more since they did have an emphasis on so many enemies. But that's really like the main complaint I have, other than, of course, something I talked about on stream quite a bit. Some of these puzzles just super suck ass. Like, I'm talking turbo cheeks. There are some good puzzles and creative ones, but a lot of them feel really lazy, where what you're doing is you're running around a building. I think the hospital was by far the worst offender of this, where you'd go from, 20 different rooms, 14 of which had nothing in there, and then the other 6 are all like keypads. And in order to get the combination of the keypad, you got to go to a different floor and go through another set of like 10 rooms, 6 of which have nothing, and then the other 4 have like a code that you'd go use on a keypad. You open that door, it would give you a code to open the other keypad. So it's basically just playing fetch. Like you were doing fetch quests in World of Warcraft, where you had to go collect the keypad number over here, go over there and use it, and it was just so many of those that, those aren't very fun. And apparently, according to chat, that's how it was in the original as well. I don't remember that. It's been many years, like I mentioned, but still, like, maybe we just have the amount of go collect code puzzles and instead focus more on, like, the really fun ones, like moving the head cube and shit. I don't know. I wasn't too big of a fan of that. But aside from those two complaints that I mentioned here, there's just not much I disliked about this game. I thought it did a great job. I thought its presentation was spectacular. I had a lot of fun reliving the story because I forgot so much of it. It really is such a good story. And the ending, still a fucking masterpiece. So overall, I think Silent Hill is worth buying. It's also a chunkier game than the original. It took me about 12 and a half hours to get just one ending, and there's quite a few, including 2 new endings to the remake. I did go back and watch all of the other endings, except for like 2 of them that I know stayed the same or close to it. So I did get to see what they added there, and I think they've done a really good job, honestly. I thought this game was going to be trash, and it was far from it. So, yeah, Silent Hill 2 Remake put a smile on my face. That's about it. See ya. I'm a guy who loves to smile. Tickle me and I'll giggle and spit up. Play peekaboo with me and I'll laugh out loud. And you know what makes me really happy? Seeing YouTubers branch out from their normal content and do something totally different and absolutely crush it. It feels so good for the soul, honestly. Because typically when you see a YouTuber-backed anything, whether it's a movie, a product, a game, whatever, the initial assumption is that it's going to be complete irredeemable dog shit. And that's because there's many, many years worth of data to pull from with YouTubers releasing trash. It's a very well-established phenomenon. It's not some kind of conspiracy theory. That's just the hard truth of it. That's the cold water. Seeing a YouTuber's stamp of approval on a product is more concerning to consumers than seeing that California Proposition 65 warning on food about like the chemicals basically being a fucking bioweapon or whatever. It's just one of those things where no one really has a good impression of YouTuber-backed anything outside of, like, their videos. So in the rare cases where they absolutely nail it, it's heart-healthy like Cheerios. But unlike Cheerios, I'm not lying when I say it really does feel good. So most notably, the one that pops into my head about a YouTube group going out and doing something very different and crushing it is Raka Raka with their horror movie Talk to Me, which was an absolute smashing success. And now, I'm happy to say that Video Game Donkey now gets to join this exclusive club of YouTubers that have made a fucking banger outside of just normal content. So, Video Game Donkey has a publishing company called Big Mode, and they've just published their first game, Animal Well. It's a passion project that's been worked on for 7 years by a solo developer named Billy Basso, who has done the entire game himself. From scratch. He designed his own engine for it as well. It's also been highly successful, in terms of sales and just general reception. It has glowing reviews, just 10s and 9s out the wazoo. Everyone is gushing grannies over this game. And now, I've played the game, and I agree. It's a really, really good game. And I'm not just playing softball with it like a lot of people are speculating. There's plenty of people that don't like Donkey on Twitter who are trying to belittle this game and just saying like, oh, it's only because he's, Donkey that people are being nice to it. It's actually just a totally average game. If his name wasn't attached to it, it wouldn't be doing well at all. And I really think that miserable worm Grinch energy is very misplaced in this case, because even without Donkey's name being attached to this game in any way, I still think Animal Well would be a video game darling. It's a very interesting game. It's a Metroidvania with no combat. You have to get very creative with your tools to overcome some obstacles. It's mainly puzzle solving. There are enemies, but you never actually fight them per se. And I actually think that makes it super fucking fun to have to like outsmart everything you see on screen, including yourself, where a lot of times some of the puzzle solutions I was dreadfully overthinking on. So this is a genre that I don't even really like, by the way. I like some Metroidvanias, but on the whole, I just feel like I've kind of experienced everything the genre has to offer over the course of the fucking 29 years I've existed in this world. But somehow Animal Well still delivers something that felt truly unique and fresh. So I went into this not really knowing too much other than, I probably won't like it, but I'll at least understand why others do. I'll be able to appreciate it, even though I might not enjoy it so much myself. But after streaming it last night and experiencing it, I actually really enjoyed it. This shit slaps. And like I said, I do not even really like this genre all that much. Like, I can always appreciate them, even though I myself don't find enjoyment in them, but this one, I did. I was having a lot of fun with it. It's a game that throws you into this world and tells you nothing. Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps and use your noggin to crack the puzzles and progress. And even though I know that that's not exclusive to just Animal Well, it didn't reinvent the wheel of Metroidvanias or anything, the way Animal Well executes on the concept I really think is just great. If the game did suck ass, I wouldn't be shy about saying that. I think at $22, or well, $25 when it's not on sale, that's not nothing. Of course it is cheaper than most games out there, but it's still a chunk of change, so I have a feeling people that don't know about Donkey would like to know more about the game outside of just memes and references. Like, yeah, it's of course very comparable to Halo 2 meeting Halo 3, but to really get into the meatballs of the spaghetti here, it's just a great game even if you have no fucking clue who Donkey is or what Big Mode is. If that word means nothing to you, this is still a game that I do think is worth the $25. Now, it is a short game. It is not long by any means, but I've always been of the belief that I'd rather have like a 5-hour masterpiece experience as opposed to like a 50-hour fucking slog mostly experience. Like Starfield, for example, spending 50 hours just beating my head against a wall and doing tedious chores on barren empty planets, that's all just significantly less fun and less worth it in my eyes than paying that same price for a shorter game that keeps everything fast-paced, keeps you engaged, keeps you hooked, and having fun, as opposed to just like mind-numbing time padding. That shit I think sucks. And Animal Well, I don't think has anything that would ever be misconstrued as padding or wasteful time, anything like that. It's just such a joy to play. So I really feel like I got my money's worth out of Animal Well, and I know a lot of people have probably purchased the game just to support one of their favorite content creators, but even beyond that, I imagine they're pleasantly surprised with just how much fun the game they got is. There's nothing wrong with buying it just to support someone, but for like a general audience that doesn't know Donkey, I do still think that this is a game they will appreciate greatly too. There's really nothing that I dislike about it. Now, that's not to say it's a perfect game, because this is not going to be everyone's cup of tea. Just fucking full stop right there. We don't need to beat around the bush here. This is a game that's not going to appeal to everyone because it is slow-paced. It is what you make of it. You're solving puzzles, and you're trying to creatively get around enemies as opposed to just fucking brutalizing them. You're not going to be stacking up corpses of all the enemies that you're killing. It's nothing really like that, and for a lot of people, that's going to be boring. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If this isn't a game that appeals to you, that's just the way that it is. I don't think that makes you wrong or anything. It's just a different taste. Like I said, I've become pretty tired of Metroidvanias on the whole, like over the last few years. This one, however, was just a surprisingly good one that really felt unlike most others that I've played before, so I've been personally really enjoying it. I never really have problems with any slow-paced games, and I think that this one offers enough new mechanics into it that really made it feel exciting for me. Like, I can't think of any other games where you have like a fucking frisbee that you can surf on and use to solve puzzles creatively, or like a bubble wand that actually has some very interesting speedrun tech to it, where you can, this I imagine is not intended, but you can actually bubble chain with it and you can solve some puzzles probably in very unintended ways. And I don't know, it's just that sense of being able to tackle new things in creative ways. It just really felt good. And I just love the way the game looks. I think most people will probably like the aesthetic of the game, and the sound too. I think most people are going to love the way the game sounds. So to me, I've really enjoyed Animal Well. I'm extremely impressed with it, and I'm very excited to see what else Big Mode will publish in the future. This is a fucking amazing start. They're out here batting 1,000 with this one. They hit a big home run. As a few others have said, it is scientifically accurate to say that Big Mode only publishes bangers. I think this game is probably the best possible start you could pray for as a publisher here, and it's a feel-good story about a developer who's put so much time and passion into this project and having it succeed. So I've really enjoyed Animal Well. It seems most people have. Again, this is still not going to be a game that's going to appeal to everyone, and I think that that's totally fine. But to those that it does appeal to, it slaps. Like, everything it aims to do, I think it does very well, and it just makes me happy seeing YouTubers be able to get behind something like this. A lot of people have credited Dunkey for making the game. He has never made that claim, as he has always said, this is Billy's game. Dunkey is the publisher behind it. And I think he's done a great job as a publisher, but it is, again, not his game. The credit for the game itself belongs solely to Billy here. I don't know how much input Dunkey and Leah have had, like, with the actual production of the game. I imagine they've had some kind of say-so and a couple of things to maybe offer suggestions, but it is still Billy's passion project. And Dunkey is the team behind it that's been able to get it out there, market it, and act as just like a really good, wholesome publisher in a world where publishers have the worst possible reputation right now, with so many of them battling for the stupidest fucking decisions over the last couple weeks even. So it's just super cool to see Big Mode succeed like this, and I'm excited to see what else comes from Big Mode. That's really about it. So yeah. Absolutely yes. The game not only lives up to the hype, but it has so much additional meat on it that kept my tummy full and super satisfied with the purchase. And just look at me. My grease is going Ultra Instinct right now. You know why? It's because we're under a boil water notice, so I'm afraid to take a shower for a little bit. So I'm just letting all the filth accumulate, which only improves my ability to game. I've been grinding off-stream Dragon Ball Sparking Zero ranked matches because the gameplay is just actually super fun and a lot different than I expected. So I grew up with the Budokai series, played all the Tenkaichi games. I mentioned this before, but one of the very first videos I ever filmed was a Budokai, I think it was Budokai 1 video, where I was giving a tutorial on how to unlock a character. I don't remember who, but I put my family's little camcorder on a chair next to me and filmed the screen as I unlocked the character. So this is a series that is obviously near and dear to my heart. And when I heard they were bringing Tenkaichi back with Sparking Zero, I was extremely excited, but I expected I'd only enjoy it casually. Not the case. I've been putting some sweat into this. I'm putting some blood, sweat, tears, and cum into this game. I've been watching videos on, like, more advanced techniques, such as how to get out of getting hit from behind, because back shots in this game are tough. Like, if you're taking back shots, usually you're eating the entire combo. The whole whopper is getting fed to you. But there are mechanics, if you're good enough, where you can get out of those. So I was learning all of that, and I've been grinding. It's fun. Like, it's a really, really good game, both casually and competitively. Now let's go ahead and get into it. I'll get my biggest complaint out of the way right now. This is something I said on stream a few times that ruffled some feathers, but I'm tired of people pretending it's not a legitimate complaint. The episodes, which is basically the story mode to the game, is extremely lazy in its presentation. Like, it doesn't have cutscenes, really, it has slideshows. It uses still images to convey the story. Yes, it is a story that's been told a million times with Dragon Ball Z, but if you're going to do a story mode at $70, it should be done well. Like, it should be more than just still fucking images. I think that is a very fair criticism of the game. Now, there are a couple of cutscenes, but they're minimally animated. It's more like action figures that you're looking at. And even still, even in those cutscenes, it'll do like a Kamehameha and then freeze. And then you'll have the character getting hit by it go, ah! And then just stop again. It's basically like fucking stop motion, but terribly done. Like Lego stop motion looks better than the cutscenes in Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. And it's a shame. Like, again, I know this story's been told a million times, but for this price tag, if you're going to have the story mode in here, just do something a little bit better than that. And they also skip around so much in the story and don't really explain anything, so if you don't know the Dragon Ball story, you will have no fucking clue what is happening here, because it is nonsensical. They don't actually even tell the story. It's as if you asked ChatGPT to give like a 50-word summary per arc of the Dragon Ball Z story. Now, they have different POVs, which help to fill in the blanks, but not very much. They do have a really cool idea, though, with this, where you can actually change the path to go down a different branching path, a what if. So, for example, like in the very beginning with Raditz, you can choose to do it solo. You can just fucking raw dog Raditz and say, Piccolo, we don't need you. And if you defeat Raditz in a quick enough time, you'll get a different path that's not canon, not what we've already experienced, which is cool. It's not like the deepest thing ever, but it's a fun little addition to it for sure. And they also have another quirky little addition where when you're in one of those moments where there's like some minimal animation with characters, you can go into first person mode. I mean, that's just kind of nice. Like it's I don't know, cool. Makes it a little more cinematic, I guess, even though the characters are just standing around when you're in first person mode. It's at least different. But yeah, overall I was super underwhelmed by the story mode episodes, all that. Luckily though, that's not where you're going to be spending most of your time. You'll probably grind that just to get the Dragon Balls so you can make a wish and get more characters or something like that. I doubt anyone's going to be playing Sparking Zero solely for the episodes, but I did want to mention that it is pretty lackluster there. Where you're going to be spending most of your time is probably the multiplayer. The multiplayer is so good, and I actually haven't had any real problems with the netcode, and I expected it to be like really sloppy. I thought it'd be like really laggy pretty often, because oftentimes fighting games on launch have been, especially anime fighting games. Not the case here. It is silky smooth. Very smooth so far, and it's pretty creative. So you have a couple different options. If you want to do ranked, for example, you can do like a single battle where each of you and your opponent, will pick a character, duke it out. This is the traditional game mode I think most people familiar with this series know, love, and expect. But they gave us a really nice surprise. There is another mode here that I think is actually much better and really, really creative. So you pick a team. You have DP points, which you can allocate to different characters, and each character has a different value of DP depending on a variety of factors like how effective they are, how much health they have, shit like that. So you'll construct a team with this total allotment of DP points, and you can have 1, 2, or up to 5 characters if you manage your DP that way. You don't have to have 5 characters. You can front load the fuck out of it by taking like an Ultra Instinct character or an expensive fusion, and then just having a second character be a step or two below that. So you can just go in with 2 characters as opposed to 5. My strategy, and the one that I have been absolutely ripping asses apart with, is I start with Janinba, who is my favorite Dragon Ball Z villain. I even have this cool statue of him here. I am a huge Janinba enthusiast, and I wish they did more with him outside of just one movie. Janinba costs 7 DP, so he is my first character that I start every fight with in order to just fucking start hitting him with frying pans. So Janinba leads my squad, followed by Krillin, followed by Chaozu, followed by Hercule, and then followed by nameless Frieza Force Soldier. So it's Janinba and then 4 weenies. So Krillin, Hercule, Chaozu, and Frieza Force Soldier don't cost much DP, so I can have Janinba as my super strong character, and then 4 weenies to try and like whittle down whoever I don't kill with Janinba. And it's a really effective strategy for me so far. I also want to give a special shout out to Chaozu. I think Chaozu is somewhat busted for his DP cost. He has no animations. He doesn't have a running animation. He doesn't have a moving animation. He doesn't have a flying animation. He is basically just out there fucking T-posing, and yet his moveset is actually super fast and hard to counter. So in this game, defense is extraordinarily important. You need to know when to counter, when to vanish, when to perception. It's a lot. There's a lot of nuance to it. And you can kind of mash your way through it sometimes for sure, but the best players are going to know all of the timings and they're going to be able to get out of these things. Chaozu, though, I think has schmix-ups that not even the best players are familiar with yet. So I think this squad is devastating at the moment. I'm doing really well climbing and ranked with it, and I just think it's a really fun format. You have your team lineup, which is always going to be different. You can have wacky lineups, you could have like really standard meta lineups with Ultra Instinct and all of that if you want to, but it just makes it so everything plays out differently. You're always going to be going up against different teams for the most part. You can always get really creative and theory craft what's the best use of DP. Is it good to go in with 5 strong, or is it good to just go in with 2 really strong, you know? It just makes it super enjoyable. You can even have giant characters too. Like you could do base form Jinimbo, which is a giant character. I think he sucks. Like I don't think you're smart to do that because he's easily punished and doesn't really do much in general. But you can if you want to. You go in there with all giants if you want. It's so fun. It's a great game mode. And now let's really dive into the nitty-gritty of the gameplay, because even though these modes are really fun, they'd fall apart if the game itself wasn't enjoyable. And it is super enjoyable. It's hard to play this game without a smile on your face, I feel. The gameplay is one that I think appeals both to casual audience and people that actually want a, skill ceiling to it, where there's a lot of creative skill expression. I think this offers both. So you can kind of mash your way through it, for sure, and it'll get you some level of success against other people that are mashing, but you will hit a wall when you start going against people that actually bother to learn all of the mechanics. And it's really, really well thought out. Characters play similarly. Like you're always going to have characters using their light attack strings mixed in with like their heavies, which will stun so you can extend your combos like combo extenders. You'll launch a character away, and if you're someone that's mashing, you might not know how to follow that up. You won't get like the vanish combos behind them. You won't be able to dragon rush and start punishing even more to extend your combos, but you can, as a masher, still get the launch, and you can maybe still like, dash over there in time or hit them with a super. Like there is just so many options that I think make it a really fun experience, even if you're someone that doesn't like to try super hard in games like this and just want to kick back, relax, and just play some fucking fun Dragon Ball. It's really well designed. But let's talk about it on a deeper level, because the mechanics offer so much depth like that you can learn, and I really appreciate that. For example, if you're getting comboed out the wazoo, if you're just mashing, you probably won't get out of that combo, especially if it's in your cheeks. Getting hit from behind is a very hard thing to get out of if you haven't like learned the defensive advanced, mechanics. But if you have, what you can do is you can super counter out of it. You can perfectly time to vanish out of it. You can use a super counter. Like there's a lot of different ways of getting out of these tricky situations, and you have to manage your skill points effectively. So skill points in this game allow you to do different things. It's not all defensive, but some of them are. So for example, if you're on standard controls, you'll press R3 and you'll spend 2 skill points if you're getting pummeled, and it'll get you out of there if you time it right. But if you're also good on offense, you can actually turn that around. So if they press the R3, they use the 2 skill points to get out of it with the counter, you yourself can respond to that and try and keep the combo going. There's just so much back and forth. Like I am very excited to see like the highest level of this, because it's going to look fucking absurd. I've already seen some crazy clips with like infinite vanishing, where players that are really good squared off, and they had the timing down on the characters, so they ended up just like vanishing 100 times, and they had all the perfectly timed perceptions and Z counters and everything. It is so exciting to watch and to play. I cannot praise the gameplay enough. I love it, and I think most people will, whether you're a huge Dragon Ball fan or not. I just think it's super fun. There's also modes outside of multiplayer. Like if you want to do just more single solo grinding, you don't have to just do the episodes. They have custom battles, and these are like user created battles with difficulty that far extends beyond what the episodes offer. I found the campaign to be kind of like a steamroll, especially if you just go into sparking mode. The AI doesn't really know how to respond to infinite punches. But outside of the story mode, I will say, there are a couple of moments in the episodes that are pretty brutal early on, such as, I'm sure a lot of you have seen the memes, the great ape in the beginning. That is pretty tough for sure, but past that it gets significantly easier. But in the custom battles, that difficulty, that can go to absurd levels. So users will create their own custom battles that you can go in, search up, and play. And it's fucking cool. So playing against Omega Shinron on a difficulty called Hell, like, it's just enjoyable. Like, it's fun because you can always have these different battles and different experiences, and it's never just going down one set path. I think it just leads to just unlimited creativity and an unlimited replayability because you can always just go to the next custom battle. So if you're someone that doesn't want to play like multiplayer against other people, you can do that. There's also tournament mode. There's a lot. There is a lot to do in Sparking Zero, but I really think the bread and butter is its multiplayer, and I think most people will find enjoyment in it, even if you're not someone that wants to grind super hard to be like a top level player in it, right? I do think even as a casual player, you can find a lot of success if you never even bother to learn like the advanced mechanics. Overall, I'd say Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is 100% worth buying. It's content complete right now. It doesn't feel half-baked, doesn't feel like anything's missing or needs any drastic fixes or overhauls, which is always refreshing because sometimes games will come out that feel incomplete and you have to wait like 6 months for them to actually finish the game that you've just bought. This is not the case here. I am excited to see what they add to the game down the line. I know they'll be adding more characters, but I wonder what else they'll be adding. It's just a fun game. I definitely recommend it. That's about it. So yeah, I definitely think it is. And this is coming from someone who's not exactly a super fan of the franchise. I really like Sonic Adventure and Adventure 2, but that's like the most lukewarm basic take there is. I think those are iconic. I poured so many hours into those as a kid. And after playing Sonic and Shadow Generations, I'm starting to realize I may not have even finished Sonic Adventure 2. I think I spent most of the time with the Chow and just literally playing the same levels over and over again like City Escape. But, point is, there are a few games in the Sonic franchise I do like, but overall, I think it's been spitting out some stinkers for a long time. I think there are more misses than hits when it comes to Sonic, and the Sonic fandom has been on my ass for a long time. They wouldn't tinkle in my mouth if I was dying of thirst because of how harsh I've been. Aside from Sonic Frontiers, I think Sonic Frontiers was a really good idea that wasn't properly implemented. It was kind of buggy, but overall I love the direction. I love the soundtrack. I think it got snubbed because it definitely should have won Best Soundtrack at the Game Awards that year. But point is, I haven't liked Sonic this much in a long time. So you should really know that when I'm saying Sonic Cross Shadow Generations is a banger, shit is slapping, because I'm not exactly playing softball when it comes to Sonic games. I do like the movies too, by the way, but we're talking about games here, not the movies. So, I didn't know this going into it, but Sonic Shadow Generations is a remaster of Sonic Generations with an entirely new component, the Shadow part. So the new content is everything Shadow related, and the rest is a remaster of Sonic Generations with some like subtle changes and some rewrites, but not anything like drastic. I didn't play Sonic Generations, so even that was fresh for me, and that was a lot of fun. So I guess I missed a really good Sonic game over the last few years because Generations went hard. But I want to focus on Shadow Generations since that is the meat here. But I wanted to make that clear because I think maybe there was some other people in the same boat as me that thought this entire game was brand new. Not the case. The Shadow side is what's new, and the Sonic Generation side is just a boosted, better version. So first and foremost, it's not a $70 game. Big fucking cheers for that. I love that. It is a $50 game, and I think it warrants that price tag. Playing through the Shadow campaign was so much fun. It was delightful, and it was a spectacle too. The music is a little different than it was in Sonic Frontiers, but it's still extraordinary. Sonic music has always been really good, though. Like, even when I didn't like some of the games, I still liked the soundtrack, and it's no exception here. I don't like the soundtrack as much as Frontiers, but I still think it's extremely good. I was wiggling my finger to quite a few tracks here. So, expect great music. Boner jams out the wazoo. And this campaign has such hype. Every cutscene is so good. Every boss fight is grand and exciting. And when you kill a boss, it's like 4 phases worth of just like badass moments with Shadow doing like Wing Chun on them, ending with like a goddamn bicycle kick. Then he like shoots dark spears at him while riding a dark stingray. Like, you get these powers throughout the campaign where you're doing the acts, you're doing the stages, you're doing the challenge worlds, and as you progress, you get boss keys, and you also get new abilities, like the Dark Spears that I mentioned, or the Dark Mantis, or the Dark Squid, or the Dark Wings. Everything's fucking dark, because, I mean, it's Shadow the Hedgehog. Unfortunately, though, I'll go ahead and rip the Band-Aid off, hit you with the cold water. He does not say damn, and he doesn't bring out any guns. So fans of the OG Shadow the Hedgehog game may be a little disappointed there, but I have heard that they're making a DLC where Keanu Reeves will be voicing in it, maybe. So maybe then he'll even drop a fuck, and he'll pull out like a severed head or something and just go ballistic. So there's still hope there potentially. But anyway, you're going through, you're getting these powers, and you're fighting these bosses, and you get like this crescendo of great music kicking in as you're like doing a meteor kick straight through the heart of a giant monster. What's not to love about that? Yeah, some of the dialogue is cheesy, of course it's going to be, and yeah, the narrative may not be all that special, but it didn't really need to be. It's not a focal point here, but they do put a good bit of time into story building, like Maria's here and Gerald is here, and they get a little screen time, and it's just enough to make you understand why Shadow's fighting and what he's fighting for. And that's good. It's not like the best part of the game or anything. The best part is definitely just going through all of the stages and the challenges and the bosses. I will say the game is way too generous with its A's and S's. There were times where I was sucking the fattest fucking butthole and like actually throwing and getting tilted and still getting an S when I finished the level. I think they could have tweaked that a little bit to not just hand out participation trophies like that, because I was not earning some of those S's, I'll tell you what. But I mean, it doesn't matter. That's not like a big complaint or anything. Just thought I'd mention it. But yeah, all of the stages, the levels are really good. There's also a hub world where everything takes place. It's not like an open world or anything per se. It's just like a tiny little sandbox where you can go around and do like side quests kind of and collect collectibles. You can get some cool little collectibles that are references to previous Sonic games and a lot of silly, fun things that you can go around and get should you choose to. It's not super big or anything, it's not like a giant world to explore, but there is a lot in it that makes it feel like you can always have something to be doing, which is nice. So yeah, I just don't really have many complaints about this game. I really enjoyed the Shadow campaign, and then going through Sonic Generations is also super good because I never experienced it. If you already have, I imagine this is still a better way of playing it because everything's been improved as I understand it, so yippee. For me, it's all fresh and it's all fun. If I did have to like nitpick one quick thing, it'd be Dark Squid form. That fucking thing I could not wrap my head around. Anytime I was like in a groove, like a flow state going through one of the levels, and I'd come up to like a moment where I needed to go Dark Squid, man, just kiss that S goodbye. Well, not really. I'd still get an S because of how fucking free that is. But, man, kiss that flow state goodbye. Because when you go into Dark Squid form, everything kind of changes. Because you'll go Dark Squid on like I don't know, like the side of a wall, and you'll jump, and it doesn't really go where you think it's going to go. So every time I do that, I jump and then just like fucking plummet right down to hell. And if I boost, God forbid, if I boosted in Dark Squid form, I was lost. I was just guessing after that. It did feel like it had a mind of its own sometimes, but I think that might just be a skill issue thing. Anyway, though, I think Sonic Shadow Generations is 100% worth buying, especially if you're a Sonic fan. I think this is a guarantee buy if you're someone who likes Sonic games. But even coming from someone who doesn't usually like most modern Sonic games, I had a great time with this fucking thing. I really loved it. I'm hoping Sonic can continue this momentum here and like build on it. I think this is probably the best Sonic has felt in a really long time. Like, as I mentioned, Sonic Frontiers had good ideas, poorly implemented and very buggy. This has good ideas, perfectly executed. Like, it feels so tight. The level design is so good. It's just refreshing. I would love to see more Sonic games like this. And of course, the Sonic movies have been killing it in the box office, and I know they have the third one right around the corner. So, I mean, Sonic stock's through the roof right now. Hopefully, the gameplay in Shadow Generations is the new standard for Sonic games going forward, and they continue to use that and build on it, as opposed to keep just shotgun diarrhea shitting things at the wall and hoping some of it sticks and some of it's good. Because right now, we know what's good, and it's the gameplay here in Shadow Generations. Just stick with that and build on it for your next games, and Sonic is going to be sitting pretty. That's really about it. So yeah.